So I'm going to start with a welcome, everybody. I'm Liza Bernard from the Norwich Bookstore, for those of you who don't know. But tonight, obviously, I'm hosting the event from home. The bookstore is still closed for browsing. We're working on a plan. We don't have a date yet, but we are definitely open for phone calls and emails and web orders. And we mail books out, and we put most of the books that are requested out on the porch for pickup. And it's a system that's worked really well. We do want to keep getting you your books in a safe and sane manner. So we are there. We're there Tuesday through Saturday, and I'd like to hear from you. And on top of that, we have a new thing. It's called the pop-up porch shop, for lack of a better way of describing it. And weather permitting, what we do is we put a nice selection of cards and gift wrap and puzzles on the porch for you to browse, because that's something that isn't on the website at the moment. So that's a little bookstore spiel. But for tonight's event, I'm going to ask you to keep your video off and audio mute. And we've discovered that visually it's very helpful if you select the speaker option on your screen, so the presenter is front and center instead of one little tile. And after that, turn on your chat option, and you can see links to the books, and you can ask your questions and make comments, which I will then share with David. We will be recording this event so we can post it on our website later for anybody who missed it or wants to watch it again or share with a friend. So the format tonight is a brief introduction, and then David Macaulay will talk about, I'm going to hold it up, wrong way, that way, Mammoth Science. The whole title, it appears, is Mammoth Science, the big ideas that explain our world, tested by mammoths with a little help from elephant shrews. Now, in a lot of the publicity, you don't get the tested by mammoths with a little help from elephant shrews, but that is on the title page. So after David speaks, I'll hop back in and I'll share your questions and comments. And I do want to mention you're seeing an email address from Michael Prowse. He's our virtual assistant for working in the background to help keep things running smoothly. So tonight, we are very fortunate that we live in a region populated by many, many talented writers and artists. And David Macaulay, who lives right around the corner from the store, and is always happy to stop in and sign a book, by the way, is one of the more well-known. David was born in England, and his family moved to the US when he was young, as he portrayed in his book, last year's book, 2019 book, titled Crossing on Time. He earned a Bachelor's of Arts at Rhode Island School of Design, and he also has taught there, among other places. He's written numerous books of fiction and nonfiction. He's got some paperback or some picture books, but his best known works include The Way Things Work Now, The Way We Work, about the human body, and Built to Last, which is the cathedral and the, oh gosh, I blanked it. Help?
Oh, mosque.
Mosque.
And castle.
And castle, right. And it has always intrigued me how David is able to take very complex concepts like flying buttresses and electromagnetic radiation, and he break them down enough to explain them in a way that's clear. But even more than being clear, he makes them interesting enough that he encourages further investigation. And part of the trick seems to be that he's always got something unexpected. It's either a weird scale, like the bacteria is larger than the mammoth, or an odd vantage point, as in this book, you'll see a mammoth underwater in scuba gear. And the other thing that makes information, the way he puts it across, attractive, is what I would call impish humor that is in the drawings. And those elephant shrews are pretty funny, and you met them in a prior book. So without further ado, I look forward to hearing more about your process, David, in creating this informative and fun book.
Thanks, Liza. Thank you very much. Nice to be here. It's so funny to be, this is my first event for Mammoth Science. And it's very appropriate that it's happening like 2 blocks from the bookstore, from the studio, and in the studio, and so on and so forth. It's not as much fun as meeting you all in person. And I cannot wait to get back to those days, but I will. I thought what I would do right away to just sort of kick this thing off is just give you a little kind of overview of the book. I don't want to tell you everything because that would be pointless. But I want to share with you some of the things in it, the ways in which I work. A couple of things I should remind you of. First of all, anyone out there who is a scientist will probably know that I am not a scientist. So it's odd for me to be the guy who's behind these, Mammoth Science and the way things work and the way we work and so on and so forth. I am lucky enough to work with great people, a great team, from the editor and art director and all sorts of people at the DK team in London, who basically proposed this idea to me. And I thought, I didn't really hesitate this time. The idea of taking something from another book, like the Mammoths from The Way Things Work, and putting them into something new, I would think a little risky, because the Mammoths were just doing just fine. I mean, they've been unemployed for like 30 years now, but it's a little risky because they have their place and people know them. They think of them a certain way. So bringing them into a book like this, I think the subject matter was appropriate enough that it wasn't too much of a stretch. And their idea was absolutely right. I mean, for the same reason that I brought the Mammoths into The Way Things Work. I want my readers, whatever age they are, to have a smile on their face, as much, not laughing hysterically, but have a smile on their face, a grin perhaps, while they're reading about things that might be a little difficult or a little confusing, a little technical, might be a little off-putting. So that's why, as Liza just suggested, I play with humor. I introduce humor wherever I can, but I'm always very careful, almost always very careful, not to overwhelm the information, or better put, threaten the credibility of the information by too many jokes. After a while you think, is this a joke book? Is this just a comic book? What is this? It has to be an information book, first and foremost. And even the books I've done by myself, like Cathedral, Castle, Pyramid, and all those, the architecture books, they're very much information books, but when there was an opportunity to be a little bit playful, I took advantage of it. And that is, I guess that is English. That is my British side, which is actually a huge side of me, even though the accent is long gone. So I'm going to switch screens and we're going to jump right into a kind of overview, and I'll talk as you see the picture. So let me do this now and get us going here. Okay. So that should be clear enough. Here is the beginning of the book. We start with matter. Now, the book was organized by DK. The sections were chosen by DK. The information within each section was chosen by them. My job, as it says everywhere except on the cover of this book, is to illustrate it, which to me is to interpret. And to, where possible, make playful, but to make engaging under however, whether it's nothing funny, but the perspective is dramatic or whatever it is. This is the image that they sent me, the very beginning, that somebody there had come up with to sort of explain matter. And they have obviously shown the mammoths as atoms. And the atoms have been grouped together to pretend that to become an ice cube on the left-hand side. And in the middle, they sort of spread apart to become liquid, sort of sliding over each other. This is the idea, but you can see, and then they become gas. But this is a very static page, which that's fine. You have to have a place to start. And I was intrigued by this approach because I could tell right off the bat that they were ready for some interesting stuff and some playful stuff. What I didn't like right off the bat were the two mammoths in lab coats explaining in front of a panel on an easel, like the ultimate sort of classroom image, which is not what I want at all. I don't want you to think you're in a classroom. I want you to be engaged with the material and not in this kind of artificial setting. My sketches, I see these sketches that they send me, and they do send me sketches often with the next sort of assignment for the next illustration. But I go right into the sketchbook and I just start drawing and I start playing, and this is my approach. And you can see it's a little different than the very first one. I mean, if these mammoths are atoms of gas, they're going to be exploding out of that beaker. They're not going to be rising like hot air balloons, which is the way the original image. And getting them to sort of slide over each other as if they were a liquid, that was tricky. And I'm not sure I entirely pulled it off, but there's the final drawing for it. It really had to be lively, and because it's right up front, it's one of the first things you see. I wanted it to be as playful and as engaging as possible. We look at matter in different states: frozen, liquid, gas, and so on and so forth. Here's a sketch of mine playing around with the layout of the page. A cleaner drawing. This is actually the finished spread with everything in it. But you can see the mammoth, we discovered the mammoth in ice. Only the trunk is sticking out of the ice. And then we start melting the ice down, and then finally we're producing steam as things really heat up. And it seemed like a very gentle, very friendly way of introducing these three states of matter. Density, that doesn't sound like much fun. But again, I'm playing with it, I'm playing with weight. The thing I have to keep in mind is that the mammoths these creatures are all the same shape and size, but their density differs, so they're obviously different weights and so on. You can see at the bottom of this, 3 mammoths lined up, and you'll see them here on the scale, which sets this up. So we have a knitted mammoth, we have the real mammoth, and we have a mammoth made of granite on the right-hand side. And the weights are completely different. The final image looks like this. My favorite part of it are the 2 buttons put to create the eyes on the knitted mammoth. In fact, it was the art director, I believe, who added these. I had just some very small dark dots. This is so much better. The great thing about working with good people is you can trust them. And everybody basically has their best interest at heart, which is making the best book we can possibly come up with. So density, a sketch from them that came with a description, a very brief description. Sometimes this was a problem of what the next illustration would be. And this was to be about materials, different materials. We've done density and matter and so on. So they thought, well, let's just build this machine. And I thought, that's not a bad idea. Okay, let's play with it. So again, into the sketchbook, and I start scribbling and thinking about how we might make this really lively and humorous and so on. And so this is the sketch that I sort of finally came up with and sent off, and it met all the requirements. So now they could start dropping type in, and I could figure out where this thing was going, so that we didn't cover type or leave not enough space, that kind of thing. Now, working back and forth across the Atlantic used to be a nightmare because I would have to mail sketches back and forth. The way things work was done entirely by mailing pieces of paper back and forth across the ocean. Now, of course, it's like overnight. And so anyway, here's my line drawing. I changed the orientation of it because I thought it would be better to have the text in the upper left. And then in the finished art, what happens is we basically rough up the clean art that I've sent and give it a little more of a background and soften it. And this helps to tie all the drawings together. You can see this is very clean and almost too clinically clean. So we go through this next step, and the stuff starts to have, a little bit of a watercolory feel to it. But there's no watercolor here at all. This is all digital color on line drawings. And that's what I do here. Atoms are next, of course. The mammoth sort of holding the chart that explains that it's the plan of the atom that they're building. The tricky part here was, of course, getting the electrons moving around in a way that suggested some sort of movement. And that's not easy to do. And I don't think it's entirely successful, but here we are building the atom now. The shrews are in charge of building it. The mammoth is just helping by supplying parts and handing them up. Here you can see, I think the electrons become a little bit more convincing in that their trails sort of disappear and they come and go, but they do create, full orbits inside the atom. And once we've got a working atom, we can add a couple more atoms, hydrogen in this case, and the blue atom is oxygen, so that we have H2O here. So we've built a molecule basically using the same scaffolding. And you can see the little shrew in the middle, basically just polishing fingerprints off one of the hydrogen atoms, probably, no idea. Now with molecules, we can sort of go into chemistry, and we do a few pages on chemistry. I'm not showing you all of those, partly because I don't understand them all. But this one at least is sort of graphically dramatic and almost self-explanatory. So there's a little bit of a changing through chemical reactions, changing the materials. Alkaline and acid, how do you determine the difference between those properties of these materials? You dip the tail of the mammoth into the containers of these various things as they come along the conveyor belt. And the mammoth will pick, what happened? The mammoth will pick the color on the chart that tells you whether it's alkali or acid. Very simple device, but effective. And we're working for readers as young as 8, and in some cases, I think already younger, like 7. Some of this stuff is a little complicated. It was complicated for me. The one thing I should say that I have and have had from the beginning, for all my life, basically, is curiosity. I think a sense of humor as well, but that hasn't developed. But always curiosity. And that makes it possible for me to take on any project that anybody suggests that I think might be interesting, because I know I have the curiosity and the determination to sort of stick with it until I've made something, until I've come to understand something. I'm the student here. I should also point that out. I'm the student behind all of these books. It's all about learning for me, which is why, if they work, it's that process. I've learned, and as I've learned, I've become interested in things, and I've become kind of happy to share with someone else what it is I've learned. Cells, plant cells, and basic plants, shrew, trunk, very simple, but nevertheless trying to get everything in. Pollen and reproduction of plants and so on in this. I also made all the little drawings, the little diagrams you see. They're not diagrams exactly, but they're tiny little drawings. They took me almost as long as it took me to make the larger drawings. It was incredibly tedious, but they bring a kind of richness to the page. Cells, human cells, animal cells, in a parade, all lined up, just to introduce a few of the 200 cells in the human body. And then more diagrams. So we're gradually building bigger and bigger things. Then our cells need to eat, they need food, they need to get energy. So we have the sun, energy to the grass, grass to the mammoth, the saber-toothed tiger waiting for the mammoth to finish the grass, and then of course dung beetles, because you gotta have dung beetles. Digestion, how are you gonna break this food down in your body? Here's the first, sort of one of the first sketches. I created this kind of crazy, not machinery exactly, but brutal ways of breaking an apple down and grinding it with the concertina. I really like this. But let me show you this just to give you a quick sort of sense of the process. Once I've got that sketch done, I put it underneath a piece of tracing paper. All the finished drawings are done on tracing paper. It used to be that you did sketches on tracing paper. I do the finished drawings on tracing paper because then I can scan them. And once I've scanned them, I can begin to add color. So there's the finished drawing. Now I just start adding color. So I got to this point, and then I hear from London that they don't really like this approach on the left-hand side. They would like it to be a little more mechanical. So we go back to the drawing board, so to speak, and I turn the whole thing into a more kind of machine-oriented sequence of events, from the mouth and the grinding and the carrying the stuff to the esophagus and into the stomach, and sort of grinding that up and then through the intestine. So anyway, the finished drawing looks like this, and it's I think it works better actually, but I didn't tell them that for quite a while. Lungs, first sketch. Basically, you just have to pull these lungs, stretch them so that the interior space will increase, and you create the vacuum which draws in the fresh air. And then you let it go, and it shrinks again, and that pushes out the air. So this is the finished drawing. You can see it's quite different from that earlier one, but I also think it's actually easier to read. And you also can see the diaphragm at the bottom, underneath the lungs. The circulatory system, this is the one I wanted to do. You can see the mammoth, and then we wanted to sort of get the mammoth into every page. And the challenge was to not really force it, if possible. Sometimes we just had to force it. This is a little bit forced. You're looking at the bottoms of the 4 feet of the mammoth. Basically, the mammoth is lying on its back, and I have just sliced everything. So you've got tusks and trunk and eyeballs that need little supports. And then there's a little sort of circulatory system, very diagrammatic. So then that didn't go over very well. So I thought maybe we'll just go with a human here and have little mammoths somehow scattered around it. And none of us were happy with that one. So the final drawing and the ultimate challenge from them was, they said, can you draw the mammoth for us, creating the shape and the outline of it just by showing us the circulatory system. I said, I guess so. So anyway, that's what that crazy thing is up at the top. That's the circulatory system in the heart of the mammoth, basically fleshing out, as it would if you peeled the skin off and removed organs and so on and so forth. You'd still see the shape of the mammoth. And then, of course, 2 of the main things, vessels for getting blood to it and from it. Skeletal system to support it, X-ray machine to show it, X-ray machine in color. So you can see that transition from pencil drawing to pen and ink line drawing to then colored scan. That's typical throughout. Muscles, the first attempt we made was to simply remove the skin from the mammoth, and you can see it on the left-hand side hanging on a hook. So after the mammoth has done its job, which is serving as a medical assistant and model for this little class of shrews, who are learning about muscles and identifying the different ones, it will put its skin back on and, probably go and get a drink. This is what we ended up doing. And this was a tricky one. The mammoths play the role of muscles. And when it's relaxed, of course, it's a relaxed muscle. When it's all scrunched up, it's a tightened muscle. It's a contracted muscle. It's actually, in this case, pulling the arm back, loading it. And then on the right-hand drawing, you can see the one that was compressed is now relaxed, and the arm swings out and knocks the shrew and his barbell away. So anyway, eyes, senses, early sketch, mammoth looking into the eye. I felt sort of defeated by this one because we're using such a conventional drawing of the cross-section of the eye, but none of us could think of another way of doing it in a 2-page drawing, in a 2-page spread. So, but I got rid of the mammoth and let the mammoth's trunk remain, being the seat upon which the shrew sits to chat with the mammoth who's looking at him directly. And so anyway, that's how this drawing evolved. Reproduction, cells, the lifespan, growing, the mammoths play. This is a little interesting for me because I've always, to this point, and to these drawings, I've been playing with the mammoth in a somewhat cartoony way. So if it wasn't really exactly right anatomically, I didn't worry about it too much. And when I look back at some of the mammoths in the way things work, I should go change them. But not going to happen. But here, where the mammoths actually became props for nonfiction information, not just cartoons of creatures, I had to be a little bit more, with exception of the hair, perhaps, in number 2, I had to be a little bit more restrained. So there's the lifespan, basically. Again, more of these little drawings that took forever. And we end that section with evolution, and this is the final drawing of evolution, from the Paleomastodon up to the aged elephant, just squeezing in the woolly mammoth who has worked his way between the plinths at this obviously Natural History Museum. Energy. This is one of those, this takes me back to the way things work. And this is when I'm not so worried about, does that look like a real mammoth? It looks close enough. It's got all the elements, so I'm just going to sort of go with it. But you jump off and you compress the springs and then they unload and you fly through the air. But there's something very static about this image. So I added another element of the mammoth going off the right-hand side. And then, of course, the motion lines, which I also like to avoid because that does say cartoon, but it works better. There is real movement from the upper left-hand corner down to the center bottom and then up and off the right-hand side. Heat energy. They wanted this apparently a fairly conventional activity in school science rooms where you heat up the rod and you see it change colors and so on and so forth. So that's what this is about. Sound energy, sound waves, sketches from the sketchbook, blurting out notes, and final drawing and final page. And it's all there. And you can see we've basically blown up a little section of the diagram of the sound waves leaving the speaker. And the only victim here really is the conductor. Light energy and shadows. Look carefully at the bottom here. There are three shrews that are kind of standing on each other in such a way as to create the illusion of a mammoth shadow on the wall. And I worked on that because I wanted you to actually be able to squint at those little guys. And if you really squint at this image, as I am right now, and so it just becomes a dark shape, you realize that they are lumped on and holding onto each other in such a way as to actually mimic the shape of the mammoth. Light and reflection and distortion and refraction. This is one of my favorite images because I struggled with actually getting this thing to look accurate. The sketches they sent me and even the reference material just wasn't very convincing. So I got a glass of water up here and I put a pencil in it and I sort of walked around it and looked at it, and yes, it did seem to bend, but then I had to figure out the point of view from which to show it. So I'm very happy with this one. Plus the mammoth and the magnifying glass are a high point for me in that section of the book. The prism, breaking light apart, and the mammoth's not doing anything here except wearing this blanket, this white blanket, to so show us the rainbow basically created as the light passes through. Now that door with the light coming through it, I had no other way of kind of introducing light coming in a very sort of thin streak, and so I put a door in. But then I had to put the shrew door in the big door so that they could get in and out as well. You have to think about these things. Seeing the color of things, how color is absorbed, and some bounces back, reflects, and that's what you see, and so on and so forth. Meanwhile, the shrews are eating the watermelon from the other side, which the mammoth is not noticing. Electricity, electrical energy, the idea of that game where you sort of make that rod move around, and if you touch the metal, a light goes on or something happens. This went through a number of changes, but it eventually became this drawing. And there's a lot of, it's a simple drawing, but I think it's a fairly dynamic drawing now. And there is a sense of the light actually having some vitality to it, enlivening the drawing. Magnetism and forces, next section, forces, and introducing forces, racing, and the kind of force you have to apply to move something over a distance, that sort of thing, acceleration, momentum. And this was a tricky one because it looks like this little set of 3 mammoths is going to come crashing down and hit this one and knock it into this device. This was the sketch they sent me that got this whole thing started, but it's actually incorrect. This mammoth moves, it hits this, it hits the 3 guys in the middle, and they don't move, but the momentum of the energy passes through them, the force, and this guy was leaning up against them and is now pushed away. So it's the continuation of that motion through these 3 static mammoths. But the 3 static mammoths meant that there was no sort of vitality, and it wasn't that swish through space that I got with the mammoth with the springs. But anyway, action and reaction, you have to get this off the ground somehow. And how do you do that? What do you need to overcome the gravity and so on? Well, you get to the moon and you can see gravity. You can see the lack of gravity. And a little display at the top that shows 3 different views of gravity. Gravity in motion often can create friction. I have to study my shrews sometimes, and occasionally we'll look at skeletons of shrews to make sure I've got my joints and so on and so forth in the right place. I've been getting more concerned about that level of accuracy when possible over time. And first sketch, coming off the slide at the playground, and you can imagine the friction when you come off that slide, and there's the finished drawing. The little shrews with the bucket of water, obviously moving to the scene of the heat as quickly as possible. I didn't need to say anything about them. Obviously, it would have made a lot more sense if they'd been on a little cart with wheels, which I had considered. But I thought, since that would be sort of minimizing friction. I just wanted the friction to be the star here. And pressure, getting on a bed full of nails, if you do it one at a time, that's going to really hurt. But somehow, if you can get on it all at once, and don't ask me how you do it, that's not in the book, it doesn't hurt so much. So they say. Flight and how you actually keep these things up in the air. There's economy class at the tail, business class, social distancing anticipated here, even though it wasn't a thing yet. And the mammoth has just thrown it. That was the whole point. The mammoth would throw the airplane. And now here it is, it's flying. The propeller has been wound up with the elastic band, and another little drone kind of mammoth in the lower right-hand corner, just to show another form of getting off the ground. In flotation, this is the sketch they sent me, and you can see, there's a lot of good stuff here. So in some cases, I didn't have to do a lot of thinking, but I do tend to overthink and sort of work my way back in and to see where they came from. So I basically rounded things out and created a little more life, I think, to the creatures. Pencil drawing with some color in it, and then final color drawing from me with our creatures, and the final spread with the addition of that small piece of additional material looks like this. So that was that process. And finally, Earth and space, building the planet, putting the plates on, which you need to do. I desperately wanted to avoid the kinds of traditional diagrams and so on and so forth, but there still need to be some of these diagrams showing how plates move in different ways, under and over, and slide past each other, pull apart, and so on. Making rocks, if you want to make igneous rocks, you have certain requirements. Heat is a biggie, pressure. If you want to make sedimentary rocks, you have to grind up rocks and then dump them into the water, but in layers, so and so on. So it's a kitchen. It's a kitchen approach to making rocks. Climate and the belts of climate, sort of peeled off the globe here, and just drawings that are primarily decorative, but just to show you the 4 main climate regions in this sort of playful way. This mammoth that you see in the middle of this drawing was never supposed to be there. He got added because somebody over there got nervous and said, we need to have a mammoth, a real little brown mammoth, or people won't like that. I've never heard from people about that sort of stuff. But the mammoth is there, as I tried to explain to them. And if you look at it, you can see the legs of the mammoth are at the bottom of the drawing, 4 legs. And if you start from the left-hand side, the back of the mammoth, the head of the mammoth under the dark cloud, and then the trunk of the mammoth. So the mammoth is there, but they still wanted the little hairy one. What are you going to do? Greenhouse effect. This was a fun one to do, and I learned from a lot from many. I learned a lot from many of these drawings. I had vague ideas, but the thing is, you can't be an illustrator with a vague idea. You can be an impressionist, but you can't be an illustrator. So I had to learn this stuff and make sure I had this, the vocabulary in my head and understood the sequence by which things were going to be shown and so on and so forth. And then just a little bit of space, the solar system, and building the solar system as if it was a model. And once again, like the atom and the molecule, the mammoth is helping put the planets in the right place. And these little drawings that you see of the other planet, beyond Pluto, those are all little painted things. I had to do those too, even though they were shrunk down and tiny. The originals are quite large. That was a nightmare. The seasons, I didn't really have a clear sense of the seasons until I figured out how to make this little drawing tell the story. And basically, you only need 2 mammoths in a cart, and you need your axis of the Earth set at the right angle with your Earth spinning, and then you just move it around over the course of a year, and the sun will hit the planet in different places, and the seasons will be determined by the angle of the planet. So it gets hot somewhere, some part of the year, and it's cold somewhere else, another part of the year. Why does it keep doing that, I wonder? The moon, we go to the moon. This was quite a complex little image, but nevertheless, the mammoth is clearly engaged in this process. Finally, the Milky Way. We leave our solar system, which is that little yellow dot, and we're on to find something else. Probably they were thinking it suggests that there's another book coming. They're very optimistic. So anyway, that is, I'm going to stop sharing because I've shared enough. And now I am ready to have a little water and answer any of the questions that you have or have submitted or whatever. Liza.
David, I'm here and I can hear you, but I can't see anything at the moment. But I don't know what's going on with my computer. Yep, I see you now. Okay, sorry. This is great. And I had actually one of the questions that somebody asked first off is if you were going to be doing a book about space. Is your subject something you come up with DK, or is it how does that work?
Well, there's yeah, I mean, no, with DK, I don't come up with the subject. It wasn't my idea to do the way things work, but I'm sure glad I did it. It was, I mean, I had friends there, and for a couple of years, they tried to get me involved in this project called I don't think it had that title yet, about machines. And I said, a 400-page book about machines? Are you kidding? I mean, that would put me to sleep. And also, I was a little concerned because it was the first time I was really asked to do a huge book that wasn't primarily generated by me. The origins didn't come from me. So I was nervous about it. Anyway, I did finally say yes. So everything for DK tend to be books that they have come up with, they have conceived, and they want me to come in as illustrator. And once I come in as illustrator, then I become, a questioner. I'm always questioning because I often don't understand what it is they want me to illustrate. And I find out most of the time they don't either. The interesting thing about the Mammoth book, Mammoth Science, is that I didn't see any finished text until all the art was done, which is weird. But that's the way DK works. I mean, they have their writers and so on and so forth. What they would do is send me maybe a paragraph and a few notes or something like, and a sketch. And they'd say, here, this is what we want. But I say, what comes before it? What comes after it in the sequence? And so they had to basically get me the whole outline, which it was only fair. But then I kept, they have experts. So I kept forcing them to go back to the experts and get a clearer explanation of what it was they were after. So anyway, that's the DK thing. That's the way they work. And you know, they're very successful. I'm very glad about that. But I really do look forward to doing my own books, my own ideas, and so on. So they sort of happen in between. DK is the one publisher with whom I've worked a lot now since 1984. But then Houghton Mifflin for all those years with the architecture books and the picture books and the Amazing Brain and so on and so forth, Motel of the Mysteries, that's all Houghton Mifflin. And now it's Macmillan, and the only book from Macmillan so far, Some Readers, and Crossing on Time, the book about the ship that brought us to this country. Did I answer that?
Yeah, yeah.
Enough?
So are you working on one of your solo books at this point?
Yes, I am trying to. I am currently working, for those of you from Norwich, you see me on the street with the dogs often, way too often actually. But I'm telling a story, like 64 pages for all ages, but really younger readers too, about walking the dog, walking Stella. And she's the oldest. And the whole point is that while Stella and I are out for our walks, she's got her things to take care of. She has her own business to take care of. I'm left standing there. And I realized it was a great opportunity to start looking around at Norwich, at, you know, at stuff, at wires hanging from telephone poles, at different kinds of holes in the ground, at ornamentation on buildings, at hearing the bell from the church and wondering, who rang that? How did that ring? So I can't tell you the title of this book, but it's a book about walking the dog. And it's basically what she's doing at this particular moment in time and what I'm seeing. And I'm trying to figure out how to weave them together, but also keep them separate. I mean, part of the book is, part of the stuff is in my head. It's what I'm thinking. And I'm also thinking of questions. I'm also asking myself questions the whole time. How does that work? Why are all those wires fastened to the telephone pole the way they are? What happens when they disappear into the ground through those pipes that are attached to the poles? The fire escape on the inn, that actually is sort of, you know, you just have to pull on it with a little bit of weight and it will come down because the weight that's hanging matches the weight of the ladder that's suspended in the air. And if you see it, and it's a very simple idea and it happens all over the place, as I've discovered. So that's the book I'm working on right now. And the next big book will be a book probably for Macmillan about the way Earth works. And that's going to be a monster. Not necessarily huge, like 400 pages, but just to get my mind wrapped around it. So I've been interviewing people for the last 2 or 3 months who are experts in various very specific aspects of how the Earth works. So we'll see. That's going to be a tough one.
So when you do the GK books, do you do auxiliary research or do you make them feed you, not make you, do you ask them to feed you the information that they want?
No, they have to feed me the information and they have to feed me good information. That's the great thing about it, which is why that book, this Mammoth Science could be done in 8 months, basically 8 to 10 months, which is pretty quick. I'm thinking Earth will take about 2.5 years. The way things work was 4 years. Body book was 6 years. But no, they have to feed me the stuff and that's what they want. Yeah. But they need to be, they're going to need to be, you know, if we do this again, more direct, more efficient with the information from the get-go, because I can't start working on a sketch and then realize that I completely misunderstood what was presented to me. And we're all working under pressure because they're also working on 3 other books at the same time. I'm just trying to work on one at a time. So anyway, it's a fun process, I have to say, and they're fantastic people. But every one of these books is an education for me, and it's a learning experience, not just about how to make a book and how to make a better book and how to make better art, how to use this technology to create the illustrations. It's just, you know, it feeds the curiosity that I hopefully will never run out of.
So what is your daily work routine like? I mean, I see you walking the dog when I get to the store in the morning.
Mm-hmm. The dog walking varies. It used to start around 6:15 or so. I'm a little later now, but it basically between 6 and 7:30, the dog walking should have happened. This morning it was later because I just felt more relaxed or something. And apparently they did too. And then I come back to the studio and by 8:30, 9 o'clock at the latest, I'm here and working on whatever it is I'm working on. And I'll be here. So when you ask me to come and sign a book at the shop, I can't wait to get out of here. So of course I'm going to be eager to sign books for you anytime. Just get me out of here a little. This is it's solitary confinement. I have a great view of the gardens next door and stuff like that, but it is solitary confinement. I feel my leg is not actually chained to the drawing board, but it might as well be. And I'm done by about 5 o'clock. I mean, I'm sort of worn out by 5 o'clock. When I am working on another book, that will all change. I will start earlier and I will end later. So I'll be working until 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock. In some cases, through the night. That happens once in a while on a big book. You just have to keep going. Mosque was the perfect example. 3 nights running, just straight, to get it done because we had established a deadline and I did not want to let them down. So anyway, it's not always pretty.
So I know you've taught various places, including in White River at the Center for Cartoon Studies. What advice do you have for young artists and illustrators?
Well, if you're committed to it, if you're not committed to it, my advice would be to find something else to do and let this other thing be your, I don't know, your relaxation. But if you're really committed, if you really want to do it, then it's just find something else to do that kind of pays the bills until you get to that point where you've attracted some attention or found somebody who sort of likes what you do or needs some service that you can provide that maybe is not earth-shattering, it's not really satisfying your soul, but it's at least working visually to create some kind of an explanatory thing, a poster or whatever. For me, it was always this back and forth. I always did something else. I always had a real job, like teaching. I taught at junior high school, then RISD for 25 years, and now a Dartmouth class in engineering, sketching. I'd love to teach, but I've always sort of felt that, okay, it used to be the job that made the money before the book started to take off, but and then gradually I realized that the books was also a real job, but it was always more fun. It was always so much fun that I never quite bought into that. But once you get into a way things work kind of book and these complicated technical books, there's definitely a lot of hard work involved. But in terms of you starting out, it takes a tremendous amount of willpower and determination, and you just cannot be put off. You also have to find people who are willing to chat with you, who are willing to sort of who will be supportive, or if they're not entirely supportive, will be useful in their comments and in their criticism, so that you're actually learning something from them when you spend time talking to them. Generally speaking, they will also be supportive, though. They will care about what you're doing and whether you're succeeding or not. Otherwise, they wouldn't be much of a conversation. But you need to have other people, outside voices, outside eyes, to share what you're doing with, and you need to listen to what they say. You may not agree with it all. I mean, I've been on both sides for a long time, and sometimes it's not what you wanted to hear. But generally speaking, as you build these relationships with not hundreds of people, don't put it online and vote, because you'll just get like 100 different responses, and that'll be useless. But you find a few people who become your kind of backup. And you learn to listen to what they say, and they learn to listen to what you're saying, and you build this sort of connection. So you have a team, but in the end, it helps you as an individual make better art, make better drawings, come up with better ideas. And when I think back to some of the first stuff I did, I mean, they were very pedestrian ideas, but I was so desperate to sort of make illustrations that I wasn't really too worried about the quality of the concept. And, you know, if I could make a bunch of drawings and sort of create a sequence, I was beginning to think about a book. And that excited me, but nothing from those early days was ever published. Bits and pieces are shown once in a while. I was uncharacteristically lucky, and I should point that out too. I mean, I graduated from RISD in architecture in 1969. I got a contract for my first book, Cathedral. First of all, the fact that it was Cathedral, and it's my first book, helped a lot. But to get a contract in December of 1972, so it's been like 3 years, 2.5 years. And the book came out the following year. And that was it. With that Caldecott Honor Medal on it, I mean, I had already made a bigger leap out of the blue than many people are, you know, making 5 years, 6 years. That part of it was luck. It was timing. It was working, finding a great person at Houghton Mifflin, who was my editor for 30 years, to work with, my mentor. Talk about trusting somebody and trusting their opinion. Walter Lorraine was that guy. And I look for that now in publishing, but I don't find it. It's a different business. And so again, somebody starting out and thinking about going into book publishing and so on and so forth, it takes some luck to find the right house, the right setting, and to find a place with just one person who will make you feel like you matter and what you have to say matters. It may not be there yet. You may have a lot of work ahead of you, but when you get that sense that somebody actually believes that you've got some ability, that's huge. So, and it's like going to school. I mean, when I think about being in school as a student, I remember 1 or 2 or 3 teachers from the whole thing, you know, from the very beginning to, you know, graduating from RISD. And those people remained friends forever until they died. And so that was, you know, those connections were crucial. So you don't necessarily get that level of expertise from the people you will bump into, although you might be surprised. But you want that sort of commitment, that sort of gentle faith they're going to show in what you're doing, and a kind of they get some pleasure out of being asked the questions you're asking, and showing and being shown work that no one else has seen. So, you know, don't discount that either.
That's great. That's great. Well, unfortunately, I can't see the chat. I can see David in a little tile on my screen. So if you have questions that you want me to ask him and we can share, email the store and we'll see what we can do to continue the conversation as we go along. I think this might be a great time to wrap up. David will be coming to the store tomorrow morning to sign books. You'll find the links to the book in the chat that Michael's putting up, I think. And or you can just call and email. And if you want the book autographed to somebody, just put a note in there. And I'm going to just remind you to mark your calendars that we have an event next Tuesday with Margot Livesey, and we're putting up a new story walk. We did David's Crossing on Time last year, and a New Hampshire author, Mary Lynn Ray, has a book called The Friendship Book that Beth from the library and I both thought would be appropriate for our first story walk this year, because we've had to postpone putting one up, and we're going to put it up in honor of Indie Bookstore Day, which is the last Saturday in August. So mark that on your calendar. And thank you all for joining us. It's been a fascinating evening. I love David's work, and finding all of it. You can read the book 16 times and find something new each time. And I think that's part of the magic of what you draw, David. So thank you so much for your drawings and being with us tonight.
Thank you.
And see you bright and early tomorrow.
Thank you, and thanks for having me, as they say.
Absolutely.
See you tomorrow. I'll be there with my pen.
Oh, yes. Good. We have a stack for you to sign.
All right. All righty. Take care. And any other questions people have, as you said, Don't be bashful.
We'll keep the communication going, and I'm sorry that my tech wasn't perfect tonight.
Oh.
We'll work on it.
All righty. Take care.
Good night.
Bye all.